I think, like a lot of us, I've followed Charlie Kirk kind of casually for the last few years. And so when I heard that he'd been shot, it, particularly when the news came out that he had passed away, it hurt a lot more than I expected. I was at work and I was basically worthless for the rest of the day. I immediately got online and then I started praying. Praying for him initially to be able to pull through, and then praying for his family. And it's been really heartwarming to see the number of people doing the same thing, not just on the right, but on the left too. Charlie was very good at reaching across. And, like, I'll be honest, I probably have seen as much, if not more, of his work since his assassination than I did before. I watched a lot of his clips and some of his debates and stuff, but I wasn't a super close follower. That being said, I was very much aware of his work. I had a lot of friends who followed him. And as somebody who grew up kind of following Ben Shapiro and Steven Crowder, I hail a little bit more from the abrasive side of the conservative movement. Even so, like, I really appreciated that Charlie was able to do, in many ways, what they did, but better. He wasn't nearly as combative as Ben, certainly not as much as Steven. He was able to encourage people to talk, and where with Ben, you know, he was really good at owning people on the other side. Charlie's goal wasn't really to own people. When he debated, he was interested in having an open and honest discussion. If somebody came and just started throwing left hooks or whatever, I guess that's maybe not the best terminology given how things have played out, but if somebody came and wanted to pick a fight, like Charlie certainly was able to match energy and back it up, but he didn't go looking for fights. He didn't go looking to get a viral clip. He just really understood what he was talking about. Unlike most of us who will go out and find a source to back up our preconception, he did the research. He was a phenomenal debater, and he was a phenomenal speaker. I don't know if he was that way his whole life or if he taught himself to do that. I know he wasn't college educated, and he was better at communicating than almost anybody I know with a degree. I can't imagine what his family's going through, but seeing the way that his wife has responded has certainly been inspiring to me. Um, One of the things that I've noticed is that there are some people on the right who are recognizing the sacrifice that the shooter's family had to go through, particularly his father. As a dad, I being in a situation like that is unthinkable for me, and I've been praying for them as well. But seeing Erica get up and forgive the shooter, that I hope that I can be as good of an example of Jesus Christ as she was. That being said, there's been a lot of not so great coverage of Charlie since his death as well. Um, and, I mean, immediately, almost, there were mainstream outlets trying to claim all sorts of things with no basis in reality. There are still people claiming that the shooter was MAGA, which is wild to me. There are people claiming that Charlie was racist, that he was sexist. I don't know where they're getting this other than heavily doctored clips that remove all context from what he was saying. Because I've seen the clips and I've seen the actual videos, and that is not what he's saying. I've seen Charlie full on castigate somebody for saying conservatives should reject any homosexuals in the conservative movement and take them to task for that. At the core of what Charlie believed was that discourse was important in preventing violence. And there's probably no better example of what he was talking about than the motivations of the person that shot him. Let me pull this up here because I can't recite it off the top of my head, but the person that killed Charlie didn't want to talk. His exact words were, "Some hate can't be negotiated out." He didn't want to talk. He didn't want to debate. Rather than discussing, he decided to take Charlie's life because he decided Charlie didn't deserve to live for believing what he believed. There's a lot of people who want to call the shooter evil. I'm not ready to jump to that. I think the shooter was certainly misled, indoctrinated. I'm not going to go on to call the shooter a victim either. But I think the shooter is emblematic of the growing rift in American culture and exactly what Charlie was trying to mend. With great success, I might add. He was building bridges where a lot of people on both sides were more than happy to burn them. Again, I've followed Crowder not so much recently, but for years. And a lot of other people on the right whose viewpoint has grown increasingly, I'm not quite going to say black-pilled, but increasingly frustrated and feeling like there is no common ground. And Charlie was making common ground. He was going out there and not just finding common ground, but he was building bridges to common ground, helping to facilitate common ground, which is something that too few people do anymore. And so I want to thank the people on the right who are honestly honoring Charlie and who are recognizing what he stood for and trying to pick up that torch and build on his legacy. And I want to thank the people on the left who have recognized that as well and are seeking to make inroads. And maybe they don't agree with Charlie. Maybe they're not, ready to sign on to Christianity and all the things that Charlie believed, but recognize that there are values that are worth sharing. And if we're willing to talk, we can build on that. I have seen some things that concern me as well. There are a lot of people on the right, some who I used to follow, some who I've always been a little bit dubious of, who are using Charlie's death to try and who are trying to capitalize on Charlie's death in order to build their influence. And while that's already pretty scuzzy, I would just caution. I'm not going to go too deep into it here. I may make another video because it really deserves its own. But I would caution anybody listening to these people or who's thinking about listening to these people against just openly accepting anybody who's preaching things that Charlie did not believe, or saying that Charlie believed things that he didn't, and using his death to try and justify things that Charlie would have been appalled by. There are also a lot of people on the left who are celebrating Charlie's death, and it seems like there's a lot of people who are really hoping that there will be somebody on the right who reacts with violence as well. And these are two different things, but they're related. To the first, especially the people who are saying, well, I don't condone political violence, but, and then proceed to list off like all the reasons why Charlie totally didn't, but actually did kind of deserve it. Imagine being the guy doing that when MLK got shot. And make no mistake, Charlie, a lot of people have compared Charlie to George Floyd, and I think in the sense that the response on the right has been overwhelmingly different than the response on the left, that is true. But in the sense of trying to compare them as comparable figures, Charlie is comparable to Martin Luther King. He is not comparable to George Floyd. And I'll come back to that. But imagine being the person that's saying, when MLK was assassinated, well, you know, political violence is bad, but like, look at what he said. If you're making posts saying political violence is bad, but you are that person. And if you are somebody who is hoping desperately that there'd be somebody on the right that would come out and perpetrate an act of violence, so you can say, well, look at this. My first reaction was to be angry. But the more I've thought about this, the more genuine sorrow and also pity I feel, because I cannot imagine what a miserable existence it must be to hear the news that somebody that you dislike and sure, maybe you found his beliefs abhorrent, but somebody that you dislike because they believe something different than you was murdered for his beliefs, and then feel the need to try to find a way to spin it into, well, it's actually the right's fault. It was Charlie's fault because of what he said. And, well, the shooter was actually MAGA. And, well, we don't really know why the shooter killed Charlie. There's not really any believable motivation. Like, imagine being so indoctrinated that you can't just call evil evil when it happens. And again, I'm not calling this kid evil. And at 22, yes, I recognize that he was an adult. But I also know a lot of the people in this community, and many of them, that's going to get me in trouble, but many of them have the emotional maturity of children, which is clearly evidenced by the fact that he felt like it was acceptable to take another person's life for things that he said. And in case you're wondering, it is not. Speech is not violence. There is dangerous speech and there is speech that can lead to violence, but nothing that Charlie ever said qualified as dangerous speech, and certainly not as violent rhetoric. Charlie never called for violence. In fact, he called for the opposite. And so for those who are hoping that the conservatives will do something violent, that they will, or that somebody worse will take Charlie's place so they'll make the conservatives look bad, stop and take a breath for a minute. Because I don't think you realize what you are hoping for. And I do mean this genuinely. When George Floyd died, the country burned, cities burned, people were killed. The worst example of conservative violence that y'all can dredge up in the last 10 years is January 6th, in which exactly one person died who was one of the protesters who was shot by a cop. The right has never embraced violence. Even the radical right has never embraced violence wholesale the way the radical left has. There are people on the right who are crazy. But the difference is, we don't like them either. We don't want anything to do with those people. The David Dukes and Richard Spencers and, I'll be honest, Nick Fuentes, some of the other people out there, increasingly, I don't want to be associated with Tucker. People that, in some cases, advocate for things that I find to be genuinely abhorrent. I don't think those people deserve to be shot, nor do I think that the people I disagree with on the left deserve to be shot. I have family members and close friends that I disagree with on almost everything. Vehemently. When we talk about politics, we get into it. But I love them dearly, and I would take a bullet for those people. Because they are still people. They are still my family. They are still my friends. And they have value as human beings, even if I don't agree with them on everything, or in some cases anything. Charlie genuinely believed this, and I do too. They are children of a loving father. And in this case, yes, I'm referring to God. Whether you believe that or not, I do. That we are all brothers and sisters, children of a heavenly parent who loves us. And that was something that Charlie got out of bed every morning believing. And that's why he did what he did. When the country burned during the Summer of Love in 2020, it was the restraint of the center and of the right that held together the social fabric. As much as people like to talk about the authoritarian right, we're not organized the way the left is. The right have always been contentious and fractious, and in some ways that's a good thing, but in a lot of ways, nobody gets in our way more than we do. Because we disagree about everything. We're like a bunch of siblings. The only thing that brings us together is if somebody comes in from outside the family and starts throwing rocks. Then we all gang up on them. But it also means that if the fringe voices in the right ever become the ones that take power, when the violence starts, there will be no cooler voices to hold people back anymore. And it's not going to be authoritarian dictatorship. We would never accept that. it will be tribal warfare. And in a lot of ways, that might actually be worse. I want to live in an America where we can talk instead of fight. I want to live in an America where we share values. And maybe we don't always agree about how to interpret those values, but the core values are the same. Where we respect life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Where freedom of speech means that people have a right to disagree with us. Because if you don't believe that freedom of speech protects speech that you find hateful and offensive, then you don't believe in freedom of speech. And that's something that I've had to make peace with as a conservative, because there's a lot of stuff out there that I don't like, and that I find morally reprehensible. That I have found myself defending not what people say, but their right to say it. People that I disagree with and even dislike. But they have a right to say those things. And they have a right to believe what they want to believe. And so, to anybody out there who is thinking that they're happy that Charlie Kirk got assassinated, or who is hoping for right-wing violence, I would invite you to try working for peace. Maybe you don't believe in God and you don't need to. Like Charlie, that is what motivates me. But I do believe that all of my positions are defensible without having to rely on the Bible or religious doctrine to justify them. And like Charlie, I will defend those beliefs and those values without needing to reference Scripture, while fully acknowledging that the basis of my belief in those things comes from my faith in Jesus Christ. But even if you don't share that, I invite you to work towards peace. I invite you to go out and have discourse with people. People that you disagree with, people that you find hateful. And you might find that you have more in common with them than you think. Certainly more in common with them than with the people in the government who claim to fight for the little guy. I mean this on both sides. Everybody in the government claims to fight for the little guy. But I've got more in common with my family members on the left than I do with anybody in Washington. And remembering that is going to do a lot more to heal this country and make this place somewhere that all of us want to live than pulling away and cutting people out. So please, I'm asking to at least consider it. And if you disagree with me, great. Hit me up. I'm happy to talk. Thanks, guys.